There has been quite a lot of hullabaloo recently, stoked I might add by a degree of fakery, about excess deaths. We had this from Andrew Bridgen. There have been more than 100,000 excess deaths in the UK since January 2022, 30,000 more than the number of British civilians who died in World War I. British civilians are by definition in Britain because they're civilians not being shot at in foreign climes by Germans. Britain was never invaded apart from the Blitz from above, so there would be relatively few British civilians killed during the war. I can also guarantee that there are more excess deaths than there were gay, transvestite, vegan Australian Aborigines who were killed during the Stalin purges. Do you get the point? Neil Oliver, bless him, didn't. He read that tweet from Andrew Bridgen and copied and pasted it into his Saturday speech.
Since January 2022, there have been more than 100,000 excess deaths in the UK, 30,000 more than the total of British civilians that died during the 6 years of World War II.
Two questions which I have asked before. Does the fact that you like what they're saying excuse them for playing you like a violin? And what makes you angrier? Them for playing you like a violin, or me for alerting you to the fact? And if the answer is the latter, we have a problem. I can find no basis for this 100,000 claim. The number I get from the ONS is 60,000, and then there are around 30,000 since the beginning of 2022 excess deaths, leaving a grand total of 30,000, not 100,000. I believe this 100,000 figure comes from the use of misleading data such as this here. Can you see down the bottom there? Excess deaths calculated using 2015 to 2019 5-year average as a baseline. You can't use that, it's out of date and it skews the numbers upwards, and the longer you carry on using an out of date 5-year average, the more you will skew the numbers upwards. That's why this particular corner of the internet is using them, because they want to exaggerate the numbers. So very briefly here, from my own calculations of the average, which I've made by taking the previous 5 years of deaths and averaging them, which should be the way to do it, from my calculations, using 2021, which includes the COVID spike in January and February that some people are complaining about, using that year does not, as far as I can see, do anything untoward with the subsequent average. The growth of that average using 2021 compared to the previous ones is exactly the same as before, as far as I can see, which is around 8,000 per year growth, once you take into account the fact that 2020 is missing. We expect that 16 to 19, then 21 average to show double the growth compared to the previous 2015-2019, because 2020 is not there, because they couldn't use it because of the large amount of COVID deaths. I do not want to cause unnecessary eye glazing by labouring this point, but using 2015 to 2019 figures at this point is cheating. It's way too low, and that exaggerates the excess. And I just have to put in this. We had this from GB News, from one Professor of Oncology, Angus Dalgleish.
Others have pointed out this excess death started and correlates with the vaccine programme. So it doesn't mean to say it's associated, but why hasn't it been looked at?
Excess deaths started in January 2021 with the vaccination programme. So the 80k excess from 2020, which is what caused the ONS to have to carry on using the 2015 to 2019 5-year average, which people are now opportunistically trying to use to exaggerate the current excess. Those excess deaths have now been airbrushed out of existence. Well, make up your mind, which way do you want it? And where did GB News find these people? And the reason they can make claims like this on GB News is because they think you're too much of a bunch of numpties to be able to see the reality. How does that make you feel? This was all stoked recently by an article which appeared in the most unlikely place, it would seem, in The Lancet. Excess mortality in England post-COVID-19 pandemic. They give numbers and percentages, they list various possible causes, and they make the point that this tends to be affecting largely the younger age groups. You can read the article on screen if you want to pause the video. It is extremely short. So what I'd like to do here is to look at numbers in actual context, and this is the point of the video. This is from the ONS, Excess Deaths England and Wales up to December 2022. This would be the master table, and I've summed the first 4 columns down the bottom there. The other 2 on the right aren't particularly useful. So you've got total deaths, 1,671,000, then total deaths excluding COVID deaths, 1,507,000, which as a matter of interest gives us deaths due to COVID, i.e. caused by COVID, according to the attending doctor, of just over 163,000 or so. Then total excess deaths, 167,000 and change, and excluding COVID deaths, 17,288. So over this 34-month period, due to COVID, 163,537, and the excess but not excess due to COVID, i.e. due to something else, 17,288. That's a per week excess of about 116. Weekly deaths average in the UK about 11,000, so that's 1% of the total. Now we can break down the excess according to cause, and we're looking particularly, I believe, for heart-related problems, on account of all the videos that we've seen of people collapsing on football fields, clutching their chests and such like. Causes on the left, so cardiac arrhythmias, heart failure, complications and ill-defined heart disease. That would be that lot, and that lot sums to 8,329. That's the excess using correct numbers and not antiquated ones being used to skew the numbers skywards. The totals for those conditions is those, which sums to 50,105. And the percentages come out at 22.6 and 17.7, so average about 20% excess. 20% sounds like a lot, but the total spread over these 150 weeks comes to about 50 a week, which is 0.5% or 1 death in every 200. In terms of this last year, 2023, this is my own tally taken from the ONS weekly reports, which I've been keeping since this started in March 2020. Pity me. The excess is the second column, due to COVID is the fourth column, so that's 29,000 total excess for 2023 and 11,000 due to COVID, which would leave 18,000 unexplained excess, which added to the 17,000 or so from the 20 to 22 stats, which you just saw, that makes 35,000 grand total. And that would look something like this on a per week basis, with the total excess in red of 1.6% and the green, the total weekly deaths, 98.4%. And assuming that the heart numbers, which were 8,000 in those previous stats, were similar here, and they could be because the total excess is pretty similar, that would then be 16,000 total, which would be about 80 a week or so, again out of average weekly deaths of 11,000. So still well under 1%, around 0.7%. And that looks something like that. The red is now deaths which are excess and caused by heart problems. So total excess per week and heart-related excess per week. So in relation to overall deaths, it's not a lot. That does not mean that nobody has on account of, because we know they have. Complications from you-know-what. Stephen Wright's widows, 120,000 payment. Lisa Eve, complications from you-know-what. Lucy Tabra, adverse reaction to you-know-what. Zion, husband of the famous Vicky Spit, complications from you-know-what. They all died from that. But that isn't really the point. The point is that they are not, however, part of a group which is sufficiently big as to cause a scandal. They just aren't. That's the reality. I know many people are deeply invested in this. What is a conspiracy fantasy in terms of the sheer numbers involved? Not that there are none. We know that that's not a conspiracy because we've seen all the evidence of that. What is such is that the numbers involved are at all disproportionate or alarming, and the numbers that we have to date simply are not that. Since I started making this video, the full numbers for 2023 do seem to have come out. This is a comprehensive list of totals since 2010, don't say I don't do anything for you. And 2015 is missing for some reason. It's all pretty much consistent with what I've already said, but those numbers are from the same source as I took my weekly numbers from, so there's no reason why they wouldn't be entirely consistent. But I might do a follow-up on that now that the actual full numbers for 2023 have come out. If people want to pin their hopes on something happening down the line, then that's up to them. Nobody is taking pretty much the now, so anything that was going to happen would happen over the course of these 2 years, and surely now that nobody's taking the thing, things are only going to get better. But if people want to hang on to this one, then that's entirely up to them. My suggestion would be to focus on something a bit more tangible. Like, for example, the January the 6th, 2021 insurrection that we know never happened, now that we've seen all the videos from inside the Capitol building. That's something which is definitely a scandal out there to be publicised better, and I'll probably be doing something on that in a video fairly soon. But my recommendation is to focus on something a little more realistic, because I don't think, on the basis of the numbers that we have to date, that there's ever going to be any kind of a scandal here.